All right, we're live here at Buffalo Trace Distillery for another episode of Whiskey Wednesday. Today we have Drew Mayville. It's always a pleasure to have you, Drew.
You're too kind.
Yeah, no, we have looks like kosher whiskey in front of us.
Yes.
So let's chat about it.
I'm real excited to talk about kosher whiskey today for our Whiskey Wednesday. One of the reasons I'm so excited is because I've been involved with this project since day one. And if you know anything about whiskey, obviously, because it's aged, that's a long time ago. So I'm excited to talk about it today. So I thought I would, first of all, start off with saying I am not a kosher expert. I'm not a rabbi for sure, but I do know a little bit about the process because we've had to follow it. So I thought I would just get that out of the way from the beginning. And since I've been involved with the project from day one, I'd like to go through a few things first as an introduction, talk a little bit about what makes it kosher, and then maybe a little bit about the benefits and why it's different from our other products that we have. And we'll end it there with a tasting, if that's all right with you guys. And I'm sure everybody online has these products in front of them. No. Maybe not.
Some do.
So how about Imagine?
There you go. Well, I think you're going to give us such great tasting notes and that we'll all feel like we're here, right?
Yes.
We already have a comment from Michael Shaw, says hello from Benton, Kentucky.
Well, hello.
Yeah, Michael from Benton. All right.
Well, hello from Frankfort, Kentucky.
There you go. So just down the road.
So today we're going to talk about 3 different styles, not one, but 3. So we've got 3 goodies for you. We have our wheat recipe, we have our rye recipe, and these, as we mentioned previously on some other ones, is that this is our wheat recipe bourbon and our rye recipe bourbon. And then as an extra bonus, we have our straight rye, which is here. And you can see by the color, it's absolutely gorgeous. For the time it's been in wood. And these are at 94 proof, and this happens to be the 2020 release because we haven't got to the 2021 release yet, just for clarity and understanding.
Yeah. I hate to interrupt you, Drew. We get questions ongoing. I want to try to grab
That's why I'm here.
Great. So that does actually bring me to a question. You hinted towards it, but Stanton asks, I have a question. Starts it off, I have a question.
Good.
Is the Kosher series a yearly release, and can I expect it from this year, next year, and so forth?
Absolutely yes, you can expect it this year. The only thing is it has to be after Passover because that's when we transfer ownership of the barrels back to Sazerac and Buffalo Trace. So every year, within days after Passover, we have that transaction, so we'll actually make that annual release. But the big difference, and I'm getting way ahead of myself, is that we want to make sure that we don't have inventory that's here at the distillery or in our distribution centers or in the retail environment because we want it all gone by the next Passover. So we have a limited amount that's available for release, unfortunately.
Okay, great. And just so you know, Texas, a little shout out from Texas, Scottsdale, Arizona, Alabama, and then somebody's in Louisville working, listening, and they said they love bourbon. So
fantastic.
Yep, got people from all over, Drew.
Well, welcome everybody. I was just in Arizona not too long ago, so. But just to really be clear on this kosher topic is that we are, as a company, entirely committed to make sure that the chain of custody of what we have is you're 100% sure you're purchasing something that's kosher. And we control all the manufacturing and also the distribution to a point as much as we can. But by being limited, it's not going to get past next Passover, so you're going to have a kosher product, which is fantastic. And since I've been involved with the CRC, who is our kosher governing body, which is a very reputable body in the United States, probably the most reputable body, at least I think so. Our partnership goes back 10 years or so with the CRC, and I've started with Mr. Rabbi Fishbane, and through the years we've worked with a few people, but Rabbi Fishbane has been the central point of contact that we've worked with. And it's been a stringent process. They are meticulous about the quality control, that oversight role for them to mark it as kosher and have their symbol on the front of the bottle. As a matter of fact, that symbol means that it's kosher and they guarantee it to be kosher. And they maintain a list of all the spirits, wines, and beers that are kosher for bartenders and for Jews and mixologists, so that it's a very reputable body. As you know, Jews can't have anything that's leavened during Passover, which is another word for fermented. So you can't own it, you can't taste it, you can't drink it, and that's part of the Jewish religion. And so after April 4th is when Passover is finished. That's when we can start to consider selling the barrels back to the company and then bottling and all that.
So interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting.
Great. So lots of folks
Sure.
coming in, Drew. Los Angeles, Dayton, Ohio. So there's quite a few. And Jimmy says Drew's knowledge is always so impressive.
Well, Jimmy.
There you go. You got a new best friend there.
Yes. Tell me where to send the check.
There you go.
So what makes it kosher? We basically specifically set aside certain barrels in certain warehouses, and those will be designated as kosher. As a matter of fact, we even stamp them kosher on the side of the barrel, and that's audited by the CRC. So we count how many barrels that we put aside specifically for this project, and that's very important because it's depends on where they are and what warehouses, how they taste. And to satisfy the Passover requirements, these barrels are sold to a non-Jewish executive witnessed by the CRC, and that happens to be Mr. Mark Brown, our CEO and president. So he owns the barrels until we sell them back to Sazerac when we want to bottle them. So it's a very precise process with contracts, and you wouldn't have believed it if you don't know anything about it, but it's very detailed oriented, and I'm telling you, you have to dot the I's and cross the T's. It's very, very meticulous. And so every step is oversaw by the CRC. And so that's even the dumping of those barrels. You have to make sure it doesn't come in contact with other whiskeys or non-kosher products. And so they're here physically witnessing what's happening. It has to go in special tanks that have been cleaned. It has to go in the bottling line that's been cleaned. So everything is extremely meticulous to guarantee that it's a kosher product. And so that's why we dump it after Passover every year, and it's a limited release, to your first point. Any more questions?
That's amazing. So, Aaron Smith, and I believe you're going to get into this right away,
Sure.
Drew, but this
Yes,
is...
the next part.
Yeah, this is, there's several questions like this. Are the same mash bills used year to year? Are there multiple batches per year? So that's a good question. Are there multiple batches per year? But really, I think what he's saying and others are saying, the question is, we have a wheat recipe, we have a rye recipe, we have a straight rye. Where are these coming from? Are they the same mash bills that we normally would run here at the distillery?
So I want to be very clear that the main difference of all these products from our regular recipes is a few things. Number one, primarily, it's a kosher product, whereas our other products are not. So there's number one. Number two is that we select these specifically from the locations that they're situated. So your taste will be different because of that. The warehouse placement is important too. Also, these are at 94 proof. They're not at 90 like typical products. So that also changed the taste profile. And so I think what people will find because of that is that you're going to have a predominantly fuller body taste because of the higher proof. And you're also going to have a heavier mouthfeel. And that's typical as you increase the proof. But number one, they are kosher products. So that's the major difference.
Yeah, no,
But
I think that...
to get back to, sorry, I avoided the question about the recipe.
No, and he's followed up with a, excellent thank you. So, yeah, go ahead.
But the recipe is the same as our current products. We use the same grains, the same everything. It's just that these are kosher barrels, and they are segregated in certain locations across the facility. And we watch it aging as it ages, and when we want it to bottle and when it tastes good, that's when we bottle.
Yeah.
So this year of 2020, they were probably 7 years and a few months. So this year we haven't actually picked the barrels 100%. We have an idea what we want, but they'll be a different age because of different times that we put them into the warehouse. So you're going to get a slight variety over time, but in essence, very close to the taste profile of this year.
Yeah, that answers another question by Aaron Smith.
He's a good question.
Yeah, he does. He's got good questions. But how often do the flavors change from batch to batch? And I'm assuming from year to year. But Aaron, as you know, we've sort of answered that. This is the first year we've done it.
Right.
Drew and the team they haven't chosen
Right.
this year's barrels, so we don't really know how different those will be yet.
We're in the process of doing that.
Good.
And it's really exciting because you can see differences, especially if you have a different location that you're getting and drawing these barrels from. So it's actually an exciting time for us right now, so we're in the process of choosing.
Great. One more question,
Yep.
Drew. I know you're going to get to some other really great stuff here, but Carl Stubbs asked, what's the difference between the rye and the straight rye?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So these first here, the wheat and the rye recipe, these are bourbons. The straight rye is not a bourbon. The straight rye is a straight rye. It's not a bourbon. So the definition of a bourbon, these two, is the main ingredient, at least 51% has to be corn. And the second ingredient, or the small grain, for a rye recipe is rye. And the third grain that goes into this recipe is barley malt. Whereas the wheat is 51% corn, wheat as the second grain, no rye.
It has to be at least 51% corn. That doesn't mean it's exactly 51% corn. Okay.
And we don't usually divulge the exact recipe, or we don't.
Yeah.
And then for this one, the straight rye is at least 51% rye, not corn. And the second grain is corn, so you switch the corn and the rye around for this. So when you taste a rye recipe, a straight rye, you're going to get much more predominance of the rye characteristics that you'd be accustomed to. So that's really a great question.
Yeah. So
before we start tasting.
Exactly. So the wheat recipe, the rye recipe are both bourbons.
These are both bourbons.
Wheat bourbon and a rye bourbon, and then the straight rye is a rye whiskey.
Yeah, so one thing you should keep in mind when you taste a bourbon, if 51% is corn, that generally gives you that sweeter, fruitier taste and aroma, whereas this one will be a lot spicier on the nose especially, and then the taste. So you'll see as we taste the difference between them.
Great. I'll hold the questions for a while now, Drew.
Okay, I'm getting a little thirsty here.
I know. Let's do it.
So let's go. I like to always go from the lighter flavor to the most flavorful, just because you build your tolerance as you go through. If you start here, then you won't appreciate the subtleties on the wheat or the softer ones. So the wheat we start with. And so when I nose, I like to swirl the glass and gently sniff the aromas coming off. And the first time when you first smell, you get a lot of alcohol because you're just adjusting to that. So you just want to adjust to it.
Do you always swirl? Is that
tend to, yes.
Right at the beginning?
Because I want to get all that wafting up towards my nose.
Okay.
Oh, wow, that smells good. I like to part my lips slightly because when you inhale, it goes through the nasal passages. And you like to try and both sides, both nostrils, because sometimes one side's a little more sensitive than the other.
Do you tend to pick up something different from one
Yeah.
side to the other?
Yeah.
You've done it enough.
Yeah.
Are you ever surprised? It's like
No,
okay.
never.
No,
I've done it so much.
I bet.
So when you nose wheated bourbon like this kosher bourbon, you really get that sweetness, that vanilla. Because remember, there's no rye, there's no spiciness, that rye peppery spiciness that you get. This is very soft and approachable on the nose. You might get, when I say sweet, you might say it's like a vanilla note, it might be apricot, and you sometimes get a nice citrus note, very soft. And of course you get that caramel, that butterscotch nose because of the barrel. It's really pleasant to nose. I'm just enjoying it.
Yeah.
And you do it a few times because you do see things different as you keep looking.
And I'll tell you, the first thing I noticed, Drew, was the color.
Color's gorgeous.
Yeah.
And when we taste it, I like to roll it around the palate, and it tells you a story. There's a beginning, there's a middle, and there's an end to the story. So the beginning tells you something, and as it transmits across your palate, you taste something else, and then as it finishes at the end of the story, you have a finish. And so each one has its own story, and it's almost like a fingerprint because that's how you identify the product. So let's taste this one. Wow, it's glorious. I wish they could taste.
Yeah.
You really get that vanilla caramel flavor, and you get an oiliness or a viscous taste. So it's like thick. And I tend to get that a lot with the wheat recipe. You get all those baking spices. I get cherry notes coming through, and then as it finishes, it's predominantly sweet. You get some cinnamon. You do get that cherry note at the finish. And some people get a little bit of apple note. It's really sweet, fruity, and approachable. And it's absent that pepperiness on the finish. So it's really nice, and it's a little dry because of the oak also. Because it's aged over 7 years, you're getting a tremendous influence from the oak barrel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good age on them, good proof on them.
I think it's really an optimum age for this.
You know, before we move on from the wheat recipe, looks like Joe on Facebook asks, and I think we've alluded to this, Drew,
Right.
but the direct question is the kosher wheat similar to a Weller? And so
it would be similar, yes, but this will be different just because of the age, the location, and the proof.
But the recipe we know is
right.
similar.
I'm not trying to say this is something so different, like it's a secret recipe and stuff, but it is 100% kosher, whereas our regular product isn't. So just let's be really clear about that.
Great.
But it is different. You can easily pick this out blind compared to other products that we would have.
Great. Okay.
But I can pick out differences between barrels. So
Yeah.
So let's try the rye recipe, which is our second bourbon. Now this one has 51% corn minimum plus rye and not wheat like this one. So right away you're going to get a tingly on the nostrils, little rye spiciness coming through. But below that you'll see honey, you'll see floral. You do get some cherry on this and maybe some peach, but really elegant, and it's a little more lively than this. This is softer. And all that honey, cherry notes comes through on the taste. It's consistent with what you're smelling. You get that oak flavor on this. I find this one a little bit more oaky than this. But that's because probably the proof we put this into a barrel is less, whereas this draws more out of the barrel, so you get more of that wood. So it's drier on the finish. You get that black pepper spiciness on the tip of your tongue as you taste that one.
You know, I think the barrel entry proof is something that might...
very important.
Yeah, it's very important. It might be not talked about enough sometimes.
We've done a lot of experiments here with different proofs of different products to see what's the optimum. And what we found is basically what we put it in at the barrel here is really a great product for the ages of products that we have. But if you were to look at something that was really low proof, say you put it in at 100 proof, something low, If you were to look at it 7 or 8 years like these, it would be totally different product. It wouldn't be as mature. So when it's 7 or 8 years of that lower proof, that means that it's going to be a lousy product compared to this. But that's not necessarily the answer. The answer is that if you were to age that same product for 20 years, it may be the best product. Mm-hmm. So it depends on how you look at it. Mm-hmm. But we've done a lot of experiments over the years with different proofs, and these are the optimum for our products. So we know, I mean, in general, everything matters. You know, everything. The entry proof matters. Everything. The barrel matters. Where it is in the rickhouse matters. The selection process of barrel, everything matters. Yeah. Where you put them in the warehouse. If someone thinks it's really simple, just come and see me. Yeah, I'll tell them. Go through the steps. Go through the steps. We try to control as much as we can, but other than that, it's nature that takes its course. So. Oh, great. So we're into the rye whiskey now. Okay, so this is not a bourbon, as we mentioned. This is a straight rye. So predominantly on nose, you're going to get a lot more rye flavor, that spiciness. And ours happens to have, you know, I would say a healthy portion of corn, so you're going to get a sweetness from the corn too. So let's nose this. So right away you get a candied kind of apple, rye spiciness. Some people even pick up some dill notes. Sometimes we're looking at a table and I key in on the dill, and it's like overwhelming sometimes. And again, you get that citrus. I think that citrus gives you a clean aroma, and that's what I pick up on, the citrus. And when you taste it, I want you to look at the story because it's progressively spicier. Yeah, it's good for everybody that's tasting or trying to taste to remember there is a beginning, a middle, and an end to all of them. So when you taste this, you're going to get that spiciness on the sides of your tongue, and you watch how it transmits across and then eventually finishes on the tip of your tongue. And that's that rye predominance coming through. But the reason I like ours so much is because it's balanced with that sweetness, those honey characteristics, butterscotch with the spiciness. So it really balances it nice, and it doesn't overwhelm you, the rye spiciness. If you had a really small portion of corn in this, the rye spiciness would dominate. And that's why I like ours so much, is because the balance is absolutely perfect. Great. And this one here too, look at the color of that. It's just absolutely fantastic. Just a beautiful product. It's unbelievable taste. Yeah, that's great. And really distinctive 3 different products here. Yeah, you know, Drew, we get a lot of questions about where can I find it, or how much is there more coming, and things like that across the board of all the products that is made here at Buffalo Trace Distillery. I just want, you know, we could talk about what's coming. You know, we have a big expansion project going on just outside the door here. You can hear it probably. Yeah. So, you know, before we go too much further with Kosher, I just wanted to sort of acknowledge the beeping in case anybody can hear it. But there is construction outside, new still house, fermentation tanks. Yep. So big expansion going on every day. So more whiskey, more whiskey of every line. From Kosher to Eagle Rare to all the other ones, there's more coming, right? Yeah, and I've always said that every year I've been here, which has been over 17 years now, is we have made more whiskey every single year. It's just never enough with the demand. You just unbelievable demand for all these products. But this one we have to be really careful with, because we don't want so much out there that there's things sitting on the shelves, you know, up until next Passover, because then theoretically it may not be kosher. So we want this to be limited, and that's the intent. That's by design, basically. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So John Binkley's group of us are going to come for a tour, and he can't wait. Jeremy actually asked, will there be a single barrel line of Kosher? Well, if you know Sazerac and Buffalo Trace, never say never. Never say never. Never say never. See, there might not be plans right this second, but next week it could be, or tomorrow. So I have learned never to say never here, because if there's a reason to do it, we're going to do it. That's right. But, John O'Connell is
tuning in, viewing from Yorkshire, England.
Wow.
Yeah, I've got folks from all over. So David knows coming to the distillery next week and asks, would there be any available in the gift shop, or is this for distribution only?
No, this is only distribution. The gift shop has only selected limited amounts for people coming to visit, but this would not be in the gift shop.
Today I noticed there was E.H. Taylor, Buffalo Trace, some Wheatley vodka.
Yeah,
so
some days you'll have Blanton's, and some days we don't like to advertise what days we'll have what, because there'd be a lineup out the parking lot.
That's right. Adam Price says he has the wheated recipe on his shelf.
Very easy
in
to
his
drink.
collection. Yep. And he also says Drew's the best. So. All right, Drew. We've kept you long enough. We're around 25 minutes. Any closing statements? Anything you want to throw out there? Or
well, if you want a kosher whiskey, you can buy the best here.
there you go.
Enjoy it.
Agreed. All right. Thanks, Drew, and thanks everybody for tuning in. And catch us next week, Wednesday, 2:00 Eastern.